Hi there, it's Sunday evening on your local ITV station, Grampian Television, keeping you in the picture now with the latest world news from ITN in London with Julia Somerville.
Good evening, this is the news from ITN. Tonight's headlines. Mr. Smith launches Labour's new politics, putting people first. Police hunt terrorist suspect after arrests at an explosives store. And the champions of tennis pay tribute to Arthur Ashe. The Labour leader John Smith today signalled a shift in direction for his party as he set out a new strategy for the future. Mr. Smith said Labour must abandon dogma and put people first. He rejected the old emphasis on state control of industry and embraced the merits of a mixed economy.
This was John Smith's attempt to answer those critics in the party who've accused him of lacking vision and fresh ideas. But it was a deliberately sketchy outline of the way forward for Labour, which began with an attack on the Tories and John Major's leadership.
Instead of making yet another speech about the classless society, he should be tackling the problem of the jobless society.
But the heart of his message was that Labour had to abandon old ideological baggage if it was to appeal to a wider electorate.
And what we need is a new political approach for a new political era. A new politics that puts people first, that rejects dogma and embraces practical, common-sense solutions.
And that included ditching cherished socialist notions like nationalisation if the party was to move forward.
For years, we've conducted a largely sterile debate about the ownership of industry and services as if privatisation and nationalisation were the only conceivable choices in economic policy.
Labour will now consult widely on what changes are necessary. That could get round the problem of the last election when its manifesto was ready years in advance. And it avoids contentious areas which could otherwise divide the party.
I think it's all for the good. I think we need to break with the past.
I think it's new policies, new views. I think it's coming from new leadership.
But there are those on the left of the Labour Party who won't like Mr. Smith's message at all. Above all, they'll see his talk of the need to embrace change as just another way of saying that they're going to abandon some of Labour's fundamental socialist principles. Mark Webster, ITN, Bournemouth.
Conservatives were quick to dismiss John Smith's speech. The Transport Secretary, John McGregor, said it proved Mr. Smith could not be trusted. Labour now backed policies being successfully pursued by the Tories, he said. A debate on Maastricht by young Conservatives today ended with a speaker ripping up a copy of the treaty. The conference gave him a standing ovation and threw out a motion praising the Prime Minister's policy on Europe. Well, to discuss the weekend's political developments, I'm joined by our political editor, Michael Brunson. Michael, we've had two speeches from the main party leaders over the past few days outlining these big new ideas. Why now?
Well, both of them have got problems on their backbenches because both the Tory and Labour backbenches are muttering and asking whether the two leaders have the sort of vision which they require of party leaders. So both were anxious to show that they had got that vision. And that, of course, leads on to the idea, really, that both of them were writing the first draft of their party manifestos, because manifestos are about vision. The Labour anxious today, through Mr. Smith's speech, to show that they're not the party of losers, and Mr. Major, in his Carlton Club speech during the past week, very anxious to show that the Tories have still got, as he sees it, plenty of fresh ideas.
What about John McGregor's jibe that Labour are busy trying to pinch all the Conservatives' clothes?
Well, I don't think it's pinching the current idea so much as the fact that Labour is now stuck with the fact that so much has happened under the Tories, the big privatisations, for example, and Labour can't spend its time unpicking all those. But, you know, I think we're going to come down with a bump fairly soon. On the 18th, we're going to have unemployment going through 3 million, and then we're going to see the big divide between the parties, with the Tories insisting still that interest rates can be the answer to help the economy, and that will be the way out of the recession, and Labour saying, no, it can only be through direct intervention, job creation programmes and that kind of thing.
Michael Brunson, thank you. Police in Somerset are hunting for a suspected terrorist who escaped during a police raid on an explosives store at a quarry. 2 other men were arrested and a handgun was seized. It's thought the explosives were wanted for terrorist activities in Northern Ireland.
Armed police surrounded the remote quarry just after midnight. They'd been tracking the men for days. 2 were arrested, a loaded pistol recovered. A third suspected terrorist with Irish accent escaped. Police later recovered a stolen pickup truck they believed he used and took it away for examination. Mist hampered their search for him.
I put out a picket line of officers armed to find him, but the mist was so bad that the officers couldn't see themselves, though they were 10 yards apart. We called the helicopter up, it came within a mile and had to withdraw because it literally couldn't see the ground.
The quarry's explosives store, just yards from the road, normally contains a large quantity of dynamite. Police said it hadn't been touched. All day, police have been searching the site and the surrounding area, 50 or more of them, some still armed. Police have issued a very detailed description of the third man, based apparently on photographs they've taken of him and the other 2 during the past days of this ongoing operation. They say he should not be approached. He is dangerous and could be armed. As the search continues, the 2 men arrested are now at a top security police station in London, probably Paddington Green, being questioned by officers from the anti-terrorist squad. Vernon Mann, ITN, Somerset.
The father of Linda Fleming, the trainee pharmacist found dead on moorland in Yorkshire a week ago, has been charged in connection with her murder. Derek Fleming, who's 51, will appear before Halifax magistrates tomorrow. The tennis world has been paying tribute to the former Wimbledon champion Arthur Ashe, who's died from an AIDS-related illness. He was 49. Martina Navratilova said Arthur Ashe was an extraordinary human being who transcended his sport, his race, religion and nationality.
His greatest triumph. Arthur Ashe providing one of the biggest upsets in tennis, beating Jimmy Connors in the 1975 Wimbledon final. His stunning victory came in the 4th set. But already Ashe was close to the end of his glittering career. A heart attack in 1979 forced him to retire, and then double tragedy. He contracted AIDS from contaminated blood during a transfusion. Last year he confirmed rumours he had the disease. He'd refused to go public before, wanting to keep his family life private. Today fellow players mourned the man they called the gentle gentleman of tennis.
And he was a very elegant kind of player, managed to generate power from, with very great ease. And he went for winners.
During his tennis career and after it, he was always a gentleman with a sense of humour, and he was a wonderful man. I'm very proud to have known him.
And the champion Ashe defeated at Wimbledon today praised his integrity and courage.
Well, he didn't take it lying down, did he? I mean, he was out doing things and making his point and taking care of his business till the end. And I guess that sums up everything that he stood for.
Ashe will be remembered not just as a great sportsman. He used his energy to pass his skills on to another generation, inspiring children to beat the odds and win. And he used his fame to campaign for civil rights and for a greater awareness about the disease that robbed him of his life.
Tomorrow, union officials from the truck firm Leyland will lobby MPs to try to save the company and over 5,000 jobs. This weekend, the receivers examined the books while the workers prepared themselves for the worst.
And 1 6, Suite 16.
At the Leyland Motors Social Club, they're calling house while the receivers decide whether to call time on the company. The club's been at the heart of this company town for more than 70 years. Members pay a penny a week from their wages. The rest is subsidised by Leyland. This weekend, the worst weekend in Leyland's history, the club's a refuge from the bleak realities outside. Barry Melia, his wife and son all work for Leyland.
It's been really the worst weekend of my life, you know, not knowing whether I've got a job, my wife, my son, or all the people in Leyland that's got a job. Disastrous, you know. Whether I'll be getting paid next week or whether we have to afford to come out next week, I do not know.
Olive Wilson's been with the company 21 years.
I've got all my life ahead of me, you know. I want nice things, nice holidays, and if, what's the life on the dole? I do think that the government has got to step in sometime.
At the Leyland factory and its sister plants in Glasgow and Birmingham, teams of receivers have spent the weekend trying to come up with a survival plan. Publicly, they say it's a case of wait and see, but privately there's optimism that one of the 3 plants might be saved. Howell Jones, ITN, Leyland.
The families of 2 Britons imprisoned in Iraq are tonight making the long journey to Baghdad. They flew to Jordan, ready for a 600-mile journey overland. Paul Ryde and Michael Wainwright are serving long sentences for illegally entering Iraq.
Michael Wainwright's family spent all week preparing for this, their first trip to Baghdad, packing clothes, books and food for him. It's 9 months since Mr. Wainwright was jailed for illegally entering Iraq on a cycling tour. And it's 18 months since his mother and sister last saw him.
That moment when he just comes out of those doors and we're just sitting down waiting for him. Yeah. It'll be a lovely moment, especially for Mum.
We won't have time to speak. We'll wait for the tears, I suppose. No, we'll just get hold of him.
Paul Ryde has been held since last August when he strayed across the border from Kuwait. His wife Julie and son William met the Wainwrights at Heathrow this morning. Only a week ago, Iraq hinted it might release the 2 men if Britain freed up frozen Iraqi funds. But the Foreign Office ruled out any deal. So the relatives remain cautious about their chances of bringing them home.
Obviously, we won't really know until we actually get there if there's any chance of them coming back with us or not. So it's 50-50, I suppose.
The relatives, who are travelling with Red Cross officials, expect to see the 2 men on Tuesday morning. They also hope to meet high Iraqi officials to plead for their release. Kevin Dunn, ITN, Heathrow Airport.
The United Nations says aid flights into the Bosnian capital Sarajevo will resume tomorrow. They were suspended after a German relief plane was hit by anti-aircraft fire over Croatia, for which the UN blamed Serb forces. Today, Britain's Armed Forces Minister Archie Hamilton has been visiting troops in Bosnia.
It seemed only proper that Mr. Hamilton, as minister responsible for the army, should finally come to see what's happening here. And he distinguished himself by being the only visiting British dignitary so far not to wear a bulletproof vest. Though that was something the soldiers thought a little foolhardy, considering how often this town has been shelled.
The day before yesterday, HVO phoned me up and said that they had 2 petrol tankers on that hill there. They're going to set them alight and roll them into the centre of town.
The minister was more popular today than he might have been. Under the defence cuts, the Cheshires were due to be amalgamated with another regiment, the Staffordshires. And some men here on active service have already received their redundancy notices. But last week, the regiment was reprieved. His message to them today was that far from reducing, whether the Vance-Owen peace plan is agreed or not, the British Army's role here could expand. So from a position not so many months ago, when there was a limited number of British troops here with a limited role, this new option could mean more troops being sent in here, but with a new responsibility. That is to keep the peace and use force if necessary. Michael Nicholson, ITN, Goni Vakuf.
Thousands of Filipino villagers living below the Martyn volcano have fled their homes, fearing it's about to erupt again. Showers of ash and rock have already killed 68 people.
In the shadow of the mountain that's threatened for centuries and now threatens again, the prayers today were for the city of Legazpi and the 150,000 people who live in it. As we flew around the volcano, steam and ash continued to rise from the crater. On the ground, they watched, waited and hoped. The scientists are monitoring Mount Martyn around the clock. Criticised for failing to predict the first eruption on Tuesday, they don't want to be caught out again.
We have installed additional 5 seismographs around the volcano area.
But installing monitoring equipment on a live volcano is dangerous work. This team have to enter the 4-mile danger zone to bury sensors on the lower slopes.
Could go at any moment.
Yes. That's why our chief, Delphin Garcia, want us to do it very quick.
Predicting the course of nature is clearly an inexact science, but these experts insist that this remains an angry mountain liable to erupt at any time. But tonight, as the mountain smokes, warnings of a new disaster remain. Mark Austin, ITN, on Mount Mayon in the Philippines.
Now sport, and Nick Faldo won the Johnny Walker Classic in Singapore after a 15-foot birdie putt on the final green. It gave Faldo a one-stroke victory over Colin Montgomery. Football, Crystal Palace suffered a resounding defeat in the first leg of the Coca-Cola Cup semi-final. Arsenal's Ian Wright opened up the scoring from the penalty spot. He also laid on the second goal for Alan Smith to score. And that's the news tonight from all of us on the weekend team. Good night.
Good evening. Well, eastern Scotland and northeast England were the places to be today. Lots of sunshine, light winds and temperatures into the 60s. It must have been very pleasant indeed. I try not to sound too envious because for the rest of us it's been grey and drizzly. It's going to stay fairly uneventful for the rest of this week with the high pressure staying right across Britain. The winds will stay light. Most places will be dry, give or take some light rain and drizzle, but there'll be fog patches around both tonight and for the next few nights. Here's tonight's picture then in some more detail. The fog at its most widespread and most dense in central and southeastern parts, and as today there'll be further bits of drizzle through the night, so take extra care on the roads. Spots of drizzle elsewhere too, but many places dry with temperatures never any lower than around 4 or 5 degrees. On to tomorrow, a similar sort of picture to that we've had today. The southeast is going to stay very grey and overcast again for much of the day. Spots of drizzle and perhaps just the odd brighter spell during the afternoon. Northwest Scotland, very much the same too. But for the eastern side of Scotland and northwestern England, the chance of some brighter spells, especially during the afternoon as the cloud lifts and breaks a little. The temperatures tomorrow, not quite as warm as it's been today. Even in the southeast we managed 9 or 10 today, 7 more likely tomorrow, and in the northeast of Scotland, 11 probably the best you'll see. That's just 52. Good night.
These are the illustrious corpses. Men killed because they took on the mafia. This man is carrying on that fight. That's why they call him the walking corpse, because he's top of the mafia's hit list.
They will try to kill me.
This is Corleone, Sicilian town, home of the Supreme Godfathers.
In Corleone, the mafia is not a tale. The mafia is not a film.
Leo Luca Orlando, the walking corpse, fights the mafia, Monday, 8:30.
Now, a detailed local weather forecast. The satellite picture taken earlier shows fairly extensive cloud creeping over the whole of Scotland, although there are some localised breaks in central and eastern parts. It'll be mainly overcast over the north and west of the country tonight, with some drizzle likely at times. There'll also be some mist and fog patches, these also most likely in the west and in sheltered glens. Further east it'll be mainly dry with partly broken cloud. It'll remain relatively mild. Tomorrow morning will continue mainly cloudy and locally misty in northern and western parts, with patchy drizzle turning up here and there. In the east there'll be variable amounts of cloud allowing bright or sunny spells through in places. During the afternoon it'll remain overcast over the north of the country. Further south it's likely to become steadily brighter, with sunny spells developing at times in many places. And that's the weather.